What unfolded was a viral moment that many saw as deeply embarrassing for his own boss, with Donald Trump's legal controversies brought into the spotlight. That was the outcome of J.D. Vance's recent interview with Fox. Instead of strengthening Trump's position, the exchange raised new questions and intensified scrutiny. Vance often presents himself with confidence, but critics argue he lacks the communication skills needed to carry the kind of political weight some right-wing media figures try to assign to him. Despite attempts to frame him as a political heir to Trump, that presence simply didn't come through in this appearance. In fact, parts of the interview seemed to put Trump in an even more uncomfortable position. Before breaking down the broader implications, it's worth starting with one particular moment. A clip featuring J.D. Vance and his wife, Usha, that stood out and drew strong reactions.
And I'm like, it's amazing that the relationship lasted, because that was the first time that I ever cooked for her. The best thing that I've ever cooked, I'm like pretty good at cooking now. Like I can make a pretty good like brioche bread, for example.
Oh, that's pretty solid.
I'd put that up there, but what's your answer?
JD goes through these phases where he tries to perfect different foods, and there's several that he's really tackled. So biscuits was an early one. Most recently it's been
my culture.
Most recently it's been shokupan, which is the Japanese milk bread.
Oh.
It's an excellent bread. And he's been working on it for a while, and he does it really well, almost as well, or as well as some of the restaurants we get it from.
I'd say almost as well.
Well, we'll all be over for food later, so
yes.
I hope you're prepared. Just to wrap up, and we appreciate
I'm going to stop the clip early because there's no need to continue with what feels like a carefully crafted image piece. Presenting them as a perfectly happy couple, that's not really the point. What matters is the bigger picture. On one of the largest cable news platforms in the country, the president's daughter is conducting a friendly, polished interview with the vice president and his wife, shaping a narrative designed to humanize and soften their image. Meanwhile, critics argue that serious issues, including allegations of corruption and misconduct at the highest levels, are being overshadowed by these kinds of media appearances. And yet, we constantly hear complaints about so-called liberal media bias. It's hard not to question that narrative when interviews like this are taking place in such a visible and sympathetic format. That's where this conversation has to begin before we even get into the rest of the interview, including the moments that many viewers saw as awkward or politically damaging for both J.D. Vance and Donald Trump. Vance clearly attempted to defend his boss, but in doing so, he created a situation that only intensified the criticism.
Well, the irony doesn't end there, unfortunately, for the Democrats. They've now thrust us into a DHS shutdown, and they claim the reason is that they want more oversight into ICE and CBP, but in doing so have actually paused any ongoing audits into federal law enforcement conduct. So this clearly is all a political play.
Yeah, so I actually talked to a couple of my former Senate colleagues, people who are able to work across the aisle, who have good relationships with Democrats, and I said, look, please come to me and the president and tell me what is it exactly the Democrats want to allow us to continue to enforce the border? What is it that they're asking for? What policy changes? We're not going to agree with a lot of them, but at least let's put an offer on the table. And what's become abundantly clear is there is no offer on the table. They're just throwing a temper tantrum and hoping that the president will give up entirely on the idea of border enforcement. So what we will be willing to do is talk to anybody about how we can make the enforcement of our immigration laws easier and smoother. We're willing to have that conversation, but we're not going to give up on the American border.
Well, I imagine after the
What exactly is he talking about? Democrats haven't proposed oversight or changes to ICE. That's simply not accurate. There have been ongoing debates within the party, some calling for abolishing ICE entirely, others pushing for stricter oversight, reforms, or funding conditions. To claim there have been no alternative proposals ignores the broader policy fight that's been happening. The current standoff over DHS funding is happening precisely because Democrats have put forward demands tied to accountability and oversight. and Republicans have resisted those conditions. While some more centrist Democrats have suggested limited reforms like body cameras or adjusted funding, others argue those measures don't go far enough. That disagreement is part of a larger legislative battle, not proof that no proposals exist. Critics argue that J.D. Vance's comments reflect either a misunderstanding or a misrepresentation of that policy debate. When discussing ICE and DHS funding, precision matters, and oversimplifying the issue only adds confusion to an already complex situation.
There's this crazy narrative in the media that deportations are chaotic and they're terrible, when in reality, the only places where deportations are chaotic is in Minneapolis and is in Los Angeles.
Oh, it's chaotic, apparently, because of so-called radical leftists in the supposed hellscape of Minneapolis, Minnesota. Really? That's the argument? Minnesota is widely known for its culture of civility and Minnesota nice, yet it's being portrayed as some kind of lawless disaster zone. Critics argue that if there's chaos, it may have more to do with how situations are handled, including aggressive enforcement tactics, rather than the caricature being pushed about the city itself. Blaming an entire community while ignoring policy decisions and their consequences feels like an oversimplification. And that wasn't even Vance's only misstep. The comment I mentioned at the start of this video was even more striking, because what J.D. Vance said ended up creating a viral moment that many viewers saw as embarrassing for Donald Trump. It's the kind of clip that takes on a life of its own online.
It's really not that hard, and it's a huge indictment of Jacob Fry and, frankly, the entire far left, that they made that their cause of the day, letting violent sex offenders stay on the streets of America. The president's just not going to go for that.
Well, the irony doesn't end there, unfortunately, for the Democrats. They've now thrust us.
So, of course, Twitter had a field day with JD, saying that it's the left who's protecting these criminals. Mini Hassan of Zateo said, "Pardon Capitol Rear tried to bribe child sex victim with promise of January 6 payout." Officials say, of course, this is a Republican. Brian Tyler Cohen, my first thought, sorry. What Midas Touch tweeted out, self-awareness level equals 0. Yeah, I'd agree. Finally, Melanie Diarigo tweeted, says the vice president, who's part of the administration covering up the Epstein files to protect serial sexual predators and pedophiles. What is he actually trying to say? It's always the same argument, blaming everything on the so-called radical left. But who exactly is he talking about? Critics argue that this kind of rhetoric oversimplifies complex issues and ignores real policy debates. A clip that went viral showed an ICE agent telling protesters they were allegedly blocking efforts to go after criminals. The statement was widely mocked online. Critics pointed out that if real criminal activity was being addressed, traditional law enforcement would be involved rather than political messaging. The reaction to this only further fueled criticism of J.D. Vance, who many see as smug and condescending in his communication style. The controversy also revived broader debates about Donald Trump's administration, including past pardons and accusations of corruption and misconduct. Critics argue that moments like this only draw more attention to those issues. Looking ahead, some are already speculating about future political ambitions, including potential 2028 contenders. Polling has shown figures like Gavin Newsom performing strongly in hypothetical matchups, and his recent remarks have focused on criticizing corruption and political misconduct within the current administration.
The Trump story is a corruption story. Yeah. It's not complicated. It's this great grift, and it's just jaw-dropping. And it's happened on our watch. In open, plain sight. I mean, the tariff is directly attached. It's about his personal portfolio. It's not policy making, it's profit making. The tariffs have one thing in common as it relates to the deals. Ask the folks in Vietnam that got a 26% reduction in their tariff rate after they reduced the delays for Trump's golf course. Look at that. I don't have to bring up the $2 billion that the Witkoff and Trump family are part of, part World Liberty Financial. And in return, they got high-valued advanced computer chips, which raised legitimate national security issues. That happened on our watch. This great grift has enriched the family by billions and billions of dollars, and he's just winding up. We have to call this out with more clarity and more conviction. That's why he looked like a punch-drunk boxer yesterday in the press conference. This hit him in his pocketbook. Wasn't just his ego. He lost his leverage for self-dealing and self-enrichment, not just leverage as it relates to these trade deals. Forgive me, but I have strong opinions in this space.
Donald Trump and the MAGA movement are, in this moment, politically vulnerable. Looking ahead, many are already talking about potential Democratic candidates for 2028, but the immediate focus should remain on the upcoming midterms. While political discussions can shift toward future elections, the current battleground matters most. Democrats, especially those running for office, need to clearly communicate policy differences. For example, on issues like tariffs, it's not enough to just talk about refund checks. They should also explain why those benefits shouldn't end up going to large corporations. Drawing that contrast is important in shaping voter perception. That's the kind of debate and messaging strategy that will likely shape future elections and political discussions moving forward. Thanks for watching, and if you stuck around at the end, you can drop the blue heart in the comments, and until next time, I will see you soon.